in the area was in 2008 when a Roane County retainer dam ruptured near the Kingston fossil plant, and coal fly ash, which was put into slurry form into a kind of mud to prevent it from taking to the air, washed out many homes and covered 300 acres of surrounding land, creating a multi-million-dollar cleanup headache for TVA. Now, coal fly ash is a waste product from the coal burning industry. Here from Peter Kirby, who is the author of 2016 edition of Chemtrails Exposed, a new Manhattan project. Coal fly ash analysis of this material deposited even today over Hamilton County is perhaps the best analysis of what's being done in the air over many parts of the country and many foreign jurisdictions as well. And that is the dumping of millions of tons of coal fly ash. Now, Peter Kirby, is coal fly ash something that the EPA regulates on the ground?
Yes, it has been banned from emitting from coal-fired power plants since 1976 with the passage of the Environmental Protection Act, which put the Environmental Protection Agency in charge of regulating this substance.
Well, what's wrong with it?
It's really bad for you. There's lots of nasty chemicals in it. The epidemiology strongly suggests, I mean, you might as well actually just say that it causes it, but Alzheimer's is very provably responsible for Alzheimer's exposure to aluminum, which is the #1 ingredient in the chemtrail spray, as we have found from the air and water sample test results. And yeah, it's really bad news. And over the years, it all started, the sequestration, the removal of coal fly ash from the coal-fired power plants started before, of course, it started long before the EPA got involved. It was just something that people didn't like, and they petitioned their government and they petitioned their industry, and things started happening, first locally, and then, of course, and then ended up going to the feds, and that's, of course, where they screwed everything up. But yeah, it first was removed mechanically. I'm in the process of working on this paper about coal fly ash and what I call the new Manhattan Project. So if there are gaps in my knowledge, it's because I'm not releasing the paper on it until the 24th. Coming up on the 24th of this month, I intend to release a significant paper about the coal fly ash hypothesis. This hypothesis has been brought to us by a world-renowned PhD scientist by the name of J. Marvin Herndon. J. Marvin Herndon is a friend of our host, David Tulis. J. Marvin Herndon gave me David's contact information, and it's been less than 24 hours since I had the conversation with, I believe, no, it's been about a couple days since I made the contact with J. Marvin Herndon, which is a great deal. And then I've been on the show. But yeah, the coal fly ash hypothesis states that the chemtrails are coal fly ash. And there's lots of elements inside the coal fly ash that facilitate the use of these particles as in this global weather modification project. There is the aluminum, there is the barium, there is the strontium. These are things that we've been finding around the world in the air and water samples. And all these different elements in the coal fly ash, I think, serve different purposes in the context of this global weather modification project. There's a whole history of aluminum being used as a nucleant. As being used, that's something that can be manufactured into small particles that will collect water on them, and that when they were doing it at the time, it was more about just causing rain, but there is a whole history of that, and the aluminum in the coal fly ash may be used largely for the collection of atmospheric water. I mentioned that there is iron. Iron in coal fly ash is, as we know, maybe one of, if not the most magnetic metal that we have seen as ordinary citizens, and the magnetic properties of the iron in the coal fly ash can be utilized for the movement of the particles with the electromagnetic energy. This is how they modify the weather. So the coal fly ash is readily available. There's just incredible mountains of it. Today our coal industry only recycles about half of the coal fly ash that is generated from coal-fired power plants throughout the nation. That number has been growing over the decades, but still they have to pay for the disposal of over half of the coal fly ash in the nation. That's a lot of coal fly ash. And if they can get rid of it at a cost, or get rid of it at a profit, have other people paying for it, well, that's a much better situation than having to pay for its disposal.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Peter Kirby. Peter Kirby is the author of Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project. You can find out more about him at peteracirby.com. That's peteracirby.com. And Peter, when Kingston fossil plant coal ash slurry spill occurred in 2008, it was all mud. And the reason coal fly ash is kept in mud form is that it's very light, and if you have the slightest breeze over a coal fly ash pile, it will take to flight. These particles will fly away in the breeze if they're not turned into mud and kept in slurry form, which is to say in mud or liquid form. And coal fly ash, according to Wikipedia, 43% of it is recycled. And you're talking about how the government is using this utility waste in its weather modification program. So coal fly ash is highly. Are we saying here that 43% is used in this geoengineering program, or is it used in many other things as well? What do you know about the wide use of coal fly ash in many industries?
Yes, the use of coal fly ash in the New Manhattan Project is, of course, a secret. It would be part, if it's happening, it would be part of the coal fly ash that is sequestered and used, but it would be, buried somehow. They're not going to tell you, in the official literature that, we're using this much coal fly ash to dump over you, so you have to breathe it in, out of airplanes. But there are, as you note, quite a few legitimate uses of coal fly ash. The biggest one traditionally has been the use of coal fly ash in cements, high quality cements. When you use coal fly ash in certain cements, it makes the cement stronger and it dries faster. And actually coal fly ash has been used in cements for it looks to me like hundreds of years, going back to like the ancient Greeks and stuff. So there's plenty of legitimate uses as well. But if it is being used for chemtrail spray, it's being drawn from a supply that we're not supposed to know about.
Well, the point you make about coal fly ash strengthening concrete, the Wikipedia story points out that Rome, the aqueduct in Rome, used volcanic ash, which is the same thing, and that's why those Roman projects are still with us today, because of the strength in that product. So the listener should know that coal fly ash is used in railroad ties, roofing granules, toothpaste, picture frames, auto bodies, ceiling tiles, doors, shower stalls, garage doors. It's an endless list. So it's a very popular material. And here it is a waste product, so it's obtained very cheaply, or for nothing, by the people who need it. But I'm sure that the utilities are selling it and not just giving it away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, hey, if it's going to cost me $10 to go store it somewhere, and I don't even need it, and I can sell it to you for $5, what do you think I'm going to do? But as far as the ancient use, or you mentioned volcanic ash as something similar to coal fly ash, and it is. And it's interesting to note that to engineers, you know, the people that are advocating for planes flying over. Yeah, well, they keep on going on and on about how, you know, we might use coal, we might use ash, and then they talk about volcanoes and how volcanoes have you know, erupted and caused you know, the same type of action that they say they want to create, the SRM geoengineering, where there's a cloud of particles that reflects sunlight back into space. Of course, it makes no sense whatsoever as in the context of trying to mitigate global warming. It only makes us warmer, but you know, they continue on anyway. And but you know, there's lots of stuff in the literature and lots of stuff coming out of the mouths of these geoengineers that talks about volcanic ash as something that can reflect sunlight back into space. So, I mean, here that, you know, it's just all the pieces of the puzzle just fall right together.
Well, it's a very complex story, Peter Kirby, of Chemtrails Exposed fame, and we really can't get even to the end of it. Some of that would the part I haven't really gone into in the way of reading about this topic. I don't research it. I'll say I just read into it. I read scientific papers and try to follow some of the literature as I can. So I'm not really a researcher. I'm just a writer who covers the topic in Chattanooga. But the question of tonnage comes up. Dr. Herndon says that he thinks millions of tons have been put into the air. Again, the product is banned by the EPA for use. It's banned by orders against utilities, telling them to not let it come out of the smokestack. And yet we have effectively not vertical smokestacks that emit these powders, but horizontal smokestacks through the sky, streaking the skies over the county, over my part of the country and your part of the country as well. And you say that this is not new. You say that this program has been going on for decades. Can you give my listener and give me just a brief history of the government's interest in control of the weather, Peter Kirby?
Oh yeah, it's legion. I mean, the whole weather modification thing is just, so there's so much of it that people I think are largely unaware of, just the vast amounts of money that have been spent on weather control. I quoted a General George Kenny, I think I'm pronouncing it right, in my last major paper, and he says the nation that learns to control the deposition of atmospheric water will control the globe, addressing the class of 1947 at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I mean, you know, they've been into it big time, and MIT has been right at the center of the development of all this. It started right after World War II. It was basically what happened was during World War II, they built this apparatus to, you know, develop new technologies that were going to help our boys win the war. And that makes sense. You know, it was a desperate measure to fight against, you know, Germany had their stuff, all their ducks all in a row. They were really cranking out the high technology, you know, with their little dictatorship. So we needed to do something. I don't blame them. We needed to do something to, you know, start producing technology that was going to beat theirs. And so that was all fine and good during the war. But come the end of the war, all of a sudden, that huge apparatus was a white elephant. It was obsolete because there was no more enemy to fight, right? So, I mean, they needed funding. They wanted to continue doing what they were doing. The big science had been established, and it didn't want to go anywhere. And I have a quote in one of my papers, the same paper, where Vannevar Bush comes into the office of Roosevelt, who was the president at the time, and he says, what's going to happen to science after the war? FDR says that to Vannevar Bush. He says, what's going to happen to science after the war? And Vannevar Bush says, it's going to fall flat on its face. And FDR says, well, we better do something about that. And so, you know, I think what they did was to refocus big science and the military-industrial academic complex onto the development of weather modification technologies. There's a whole bunch of scientists from the original Manhattan Project who later are on record as going on to do serious work in weather modification and the atmospheric sciences. Vannevar Bush was the guy basically who started the whole black budget deal and started the whole military industrial academic complex. And he is on record in the most cited weather modification report of all time. He dedicates the report by advocating for weather control and talking about how, there's all this stuff we can do. Well, let's get at it, he says. And so they have since 1946. There was the big rollout. We know the war ended in 1945. And then next year, late 1946, there was a big public relations extravaganza coming out of the GE laboratories. 3 scientists, Irving Langmuir, Bernard Vonnegut, and Vincent Schaefer. Langmuir was a Nobel Prize winner. He was the first scientist from an industrial lab to win the Nobel Prize. Anyway, they started on this big weather modification thing. It was all in the papers, all over the radio. People were going crazy. What had been done was that they had dumped dry ice out of a plane, and they dumped the dry ice into a cumulus cloud or rain cloud, and the cloud billowed up, and it started raining. I guess maybe it was snowing or something, but it generated precipitation, and the press made a big deal about it. And your average American was like, okay, they're dumping dry ice, carbon dioxide, no problem. I mean, that would be my reaction too. That's innocuous. There's no problem there. Great, they made it rain. That's cool. Well, next thing you know, in a couple of months, the same trio, headed by Vonnegut this time, who discovered the use of silver iodide, they're dumping silver iodide out of planes and saying, "Oh, look what we found. Now we don't have to. We can dump dry ice. We can dump silver iodide," which is what they've continued using today. Which is what they use today in the conventional weather modification industry. The only, my problem with that is silver iodide has questionable health impacts. There's never been a long-term study done pertaining to the biological impacts of silver iodide, and they've been spraying us with it since 1947. And so it shows you the basis for this New Manhattan Project, and shows you how the government is not doing their job when it comes to making sure that what we're being sprayed with is something that's not going to hurt us.
Well, let me ask you about the scale problem, Peter Kirby. The scale problem says, or suggests, that when things get large, when programs get large and impersonal, that it's harder for the actors to see the moral evil of what they may be doing. Say, obliterating a city of civilians. That's a moral evil. And I would say that's not just a crime, that's a sin, it's a crime, it's mass murder. And yet people involved in that, and people reading about it, they defend it as national necessity. How do people who are involved in this program live with themselves? How do they justify involving themselves in the dumping of materials over civilian populations with unknown health effects? How do they do that? We have just about another minute or so. What's your answer?
Yeah, that's getting into the psychology of it all. I mean, someone like you and I, looking from without, looking at them and looking at what they're doing, we say, what the hell is this? I mean, what's wrong with you people? You know what I mean? I think that the people who are involved in this project have been brainwashed from birth, and I think there's a cult of big science has evolved, and it has a lot to do with the fact that that's where the money is. It's gone beyond just funding. There's always that. There's always been money available for this, and so it's attracted a lot of people to it. But it's gone on for so long that it becomes like a generational thing. You know what I mean? It becomes something that's just ingrained into the way people go about doing things. I mean, we have in certain areas of this country, I've seen video of it, a city works truck will just drive down the street, just spraying herbicide all over the sidewalk, because the plants are overgrown. I mean, what if you happen to be walking down the sidewalk at that time and, you didn't get the memo that they're, spraying all kinds of crap all over the place, and this truck drives by and just splatters you with all kinds of garbage. This happens. And this is the mentality. It's just people just see it as just a job, and this is just what they do, and they've been told that it's fine and that it's great. I mean, you know, when very powerful, rich and powerful people tell you, no, this is what we're doing, it's fine. I mean,
Peter, tell my listener what your website is.
PeterAKirby.com, PeterAKirby.com. Please go there and subscribe to my email list on the homepage. There's a form.
Peter is the author of Chemtrails Exposed, the New Manhattan Project. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
We've been talking about coal fly ash and the whole weather modification program over Chattanooga and Hamilton County, a global phenomenon, a global marvel, if you will. David Tulis, Nooga Radio. Now, some important announcements.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM.
Hi, this is Nadia behind the green door. You've had ice cream